The marble was so cold it burned. Two small girls, no older than 8, moved on their knees across an endless white floor. Their hands were raw, their sleeves rolled up past their elbows, exposing thin arms that shook with every push of the mop. The bucket beside them was nearly as tall as they were. The water inside had gone gray an hour ago. They didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. They just scrubbed. The mansion around them was silent, not peaceful, just empty. The kind of silence that made you feel like you were doing something wrong just by breathing. Chandeliers hung overhead like frozen stars. Paintings stared down from the walls. But there was no warmth, no laughter, no life. Just two little girls and a floor that stretched on forever. Welcome back to the channel. Before we go any further, I just want to say thank you. Seriously, your support, your comments, the fact that you keep coming back, that's what keeps this channel alive. Every like, every share, every subscription, it all matters. So if this story moves you today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You're not just watching, you're part of something bigger. Now, let's get back to the floor. Their feet were bare, numb. They'd learned not to complain. Complaints made things worse. So they stayed quiet, heads down, hands moving. The soap stung the cracks in their palms, but they didn't stop. Stopping wasn't allowed. One twin glanced at the other, just for a second. Her sister's face was blank, empty, like she'd learned to turn herself off. Maybe that was easier. Maybe that's what you had to do to survive in a place like this. Then they heard it. Footsteps, not loud, not rushed, calm, steady. The kind of footsteps that didn't need to hurry because they already owned everything they touched. The twins froze. The mop slipped from one girl's hands and clattered against the marble. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She flinched. Her sister grabbed her wrist. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't look up. But the footsteps didn't stop. They got closer, closer, and then they stopped, right behind them. The air in the room changed. It got heavier, thicker, like the walls were holding their breath too. And then a voice broke the silence. Deep, calm, but sharp enough to cut glass. Why are children scrubbing the floors of my house? The twins didn't move. They couldn't. Their bodies locked in place like someone had pressed pause on their lives. Their hearts hammered so loud they were sure he could hear it. But they didn't answer, because no one had ever asked them that question before. No one had ever cared why they were on their knees. No one had ever stopped long enough to notice they were just kids. The man behind them didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His presence alone was louder than any shout. I asked you a question. Still, they said nothing. Fear wrapped around their throats like a fist. What were they supposed to say? The truth? That they'd been told to clean or go hungry? That this was normal? That no one had ever thought it was wrong? The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 5. It felt like forever. And somewhere deep in that terrible quiet, something shifted. The girls didn't know it yet, but the man standing behind them, he wasn't walking away. He wasn't ignoring them. He wasn't pretending he hadn't seen. For the first time in their lives, someone had stopped to ask why, and that question was about to change everything. If you want to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed, because what comes after this moment, you won't believe it. Let's rewind. Because before that question stopped everything, before those two girls ended up on their knees in a stranger's mansion, there was a mother. Her name was Mariam Morgan, and she was dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, just slowly. The kind of dying that happens in the corners of life where no one's really looking, the kind that poverty makes invisible. The apartment was one room, not one bedroom. One room, period. A mattress on the floor, a hot plate that only worked half the time. a sink that dripped no matter how tight you twisted the handle. The walls were thin enough to hear every argument, every prayer, every broken dream from the neighbors next door. But it was home, and Mariam made it warm. Every night she'd sit on the edge of that mattress with her two daughters curled up beside her, Anaya on the left, Victoria on the right, their small bodies tucked under a blanket that had more holes than fabric, and she'd tell them stories. Not fairy tales, real ones, about her childhood, about her mother, about how love was the only thing you could carry that never got heavy. Anaya was the older twin by 3 minutes, quiet, observant, the kind of kid who noticed everything but said very little. She'd watch her mother's face like she was trying to memorize it, like she knew something the rest of the world didn't. Victoria was different, softer. She still believed in miracles. She'd hold her mother's hand and ask questions, endless questions. "Will things get better, Mama? Are we going to be okay? Do you promise?" And Mariam would smile. Every single time, even when the answer was a lie. The cough started small, just a tickle. Then it got louder, deeper, until one morning Mariam coughed into her hand and saw red. Blood. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she washed her hands, put on her coat, and went to work. Because that's what you do when you're poor. You don't get to be sick. You don't get to rest. You work, or you lose everything. Mariam cleaned houses for a living, rich people's houses, the kind with marble floors and rooms no one ever used. She worked for an agency. No benefits, no sick days, no loyalty. If you didn't show up, they replaced you. Simple as that. So she showed up, every day, even when her chest burned, even when she couldn't catch her breath, even when her legs felt like they were made of water. She hid it, behind smiles, behind small talk, behind the same lie she told her daughters. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine, and if you're watching this, take a second and hit that like button, because Mariam's story, it's one a lot of people are living right now, and it needs to be heard. It happened on a Tuesday. Mariam was halfway to the bus stop when her vision blurred. Her knees buckled, and the world tilted sideways. She woke up in a hospital bed, fluorescent lights, sterile walls, a doctor with kind eyes and terrible news. "Ms. Morgan, we need to talk about your lungs." The words came gently, but they hit like stones. Stage 3, pneumonia. Chronic, complications, treatment, cost, time. That last word hung in the air like smoke. Time. "How much time?" Mariam asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. The doctor hesitated, just for a second, but that second told her everything. "With treatment, we can manage it, but without rest, without proper care." He trailed off. He didn't have to finish. Mariam nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. She just asked one question. "Can I go home?" She made it back to the apartment just before dark. The girls were waiting. They always were. Anaya opened the door before Mariam even knocked, like she'd been standing there the whole time. "Mama," Victoria whispered. Her voice cracked. "Where were you?" "I'm okay, baby," Mariam said. She pulled them both close. "I'm okay." But Anaya didn't say anything. She just stared at her mother's face, searching, reading, knowing. That night, Mariam fell asleep early, exhausted, broken, but still trying to hold it together. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that her daughters weren't asleep. They were sitting on the floor, backs against the wall, listening. To every word the doctor had said on that phone call Mariam thought they couldn't hear, to every apology, to every mention of the word time. And in that moment, something changed in those two little girls. They stopped being children. They became soldiers, because if their mother was running out of time, then they had to find a way to buy more, no matter what it cost. The apartment was dark. Mariam's breathing was shallow, uneven. Each breath sounded like it hurt. Anaya and Victoria sat on the floor, backs pressed against the cold wall. They hadn't moved in over an hour. They just sat there, listening, thinking, afraid. "If Mama doesn't go to work," Victoria whispered. Her voice was so quiet it barely existed. "They'll replace her." Anaya didn't respond right away. She just stared at the ceiling, at the water stain that looked like a broken heart. She'd stared at it 1,000 times before, but tonight it felt different. Tonight it felt like a warning. "And if they replace her," Victoria continued, "we won't have money for rent, or food, or the medicine." Anaya finally looked at her sister. Their eyes met in the darkness, and in that moment, something passed between them. Something silent, something terrible. They both knew what had to happen. No tears, no debate, just love. The kind of love that makes you do impossible things. Before we go any further, pause for just a second. Hit that subscribe button, because what these girls are about to do, it's going to break your heart, and you need to see how this ends. They moved quietly, like ghosts. Mariam's cleaning uniform was hanging on a hook by the door. Faded blue fabric, bleach stains on the sleeves, the smell of chemicals and sweat. Anaya pulled it down, held it up. It was huge, big enough to swallow both of them whole. But they didn't care. Victoria found the second uniform at the bottom of a laundry basket. It smelled like exhaustion, like every shift their mother had ever worked. She pressed it to her face for just a second. Then she pulled it on. The sleeves hung past their hands. The hems dragged on the floor. They looked like kids playing dress-up, except this wasn't a game. Anaya rolled up her sleeves. Once, twice, 3 times, until her small hands were finally free. Victoria did the same. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Then Anaya grabbed a piece of paper, a pen, and she wrote. Her handwriting was messy, childish, but the words were clear. "Mama, please don't be angry. We are helping." She folded the note, left it on the mattress beside their mother's sleeping body, and then they walked out the door. The bus ride felt endless. They sat together in the back, 2 tiny figures drowning in oversized uniforms. Other passengers glanced at them. Some frowned. Some looked away. But no one asked questions, because people don't ask questions when it's easier not to know the answer. Victoria's hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the seat so hard her knuckles turned white. "What if they don't let us in?" she whispered. Anaya didn't answer, because she didn't have an answer. She just reached over and squeezed her sister's hand. "We have to try," she said. "For Mama." Drop a like if you're feeling this story. Seriously, your support is everything. The estate appeared like a fortress. Tall iron gates, stone walls that stretched higher than anything they'd ever seen. Perfectly trimmed hedges. A driveway that looked longer than their entire street back home. The twins stood at the entrance. Small, invisible, terrified. A security guard stepped out of his booth. He looked down at them. His face was unreadable. "You 2 lost?" Anaya swallowed hard, forced herself to speak. We're here to clean." The guard's eyes narrowed. He looked them up and down. 2 kids in uniforms 3 sizes too big. Barefoot. Exhausted. For a moment, nothing happened. The world held its breath. Then the guard sighed. He glanced back at the mansion, at the endless list of names on his clipboard, at the dozen staff members coming and going every single day. He assumed they belonged to someone, a contractor, a cleaning crew, someone else's responsibility. So he waved them through. "Stay out of trouble," he muttered. And just like that, they were in. The driveway felt like walking through a dream. Everything was too clean, too perfect, too big. The twins moved slowly, side by side, their bare feet silent on the smooth pavement. They passed gardens that looked like paintings, fountains that sparkled in the early morning light, cars that cost more than their entire lives combined. And with every step, the world they knew got smaller, further away, like it was disappearing behind them. Victoria stopped, just for a second. She turned back toward the gate, toward home, toward everything familiar. Anaya, her voice cracked. What if... Don't, Anaya said. Her voice was firm, steady, but her eyes were scared. Don't think about what if. We're already here. Victoria nodded, wiped her eyes, and kept walking. Ahead of them, the mansion rose like a mountain. White stone, endless windows, columns that touched the sky. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And the twins, two 8-year-old girls in stolen uniforms, were about to step inside a world that was never built for people like them. A world that didn't care if they survived. A world that would break them, or force them to become something stronger. Comment below. Would you have done the same for your family? Let's talk about it. They reached the front door. Anaya raised her hand and knocked. The question hung in the air like thunder. Why are children scrubbing the floors of my house? Mr. Cooper didn't move. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, calm. But his eyes were cutting through everything, reading the room, reading the fear, reading the silence that was trying too hard to be normal. He'd built an empire by noticing things other people missed. Details, patterns, the small cracks in stories that didn't add up. And right now, everything about this moment was wrong. 2 girls, barefoot, uniforms swallowing their tiny frames, hands raw and red, eyes locked on the floor like looking up might kill them. He'd seen a lot in his life, but this stopped him cold. Behind him, the staff shifted uncomfortably. A manager stepped forward. Plastic smile, practiced tone. Mr. Cooper, I apologize for the disruption. These are temporary helpers. We're short-staffed today and... Temporary helpers, Mr. Cooper repeated slowly. He didn't turn around. His eyes stayed on the twins. They look about 8 years old. Well, the manager stammered. They're supervised. Their mother works for the agency and... Where is their mother? Silence. The manager glanced at the other staff members, looking for backup, for an exit, for anything that would make this conversation go away. But Mr. Cooper didn't move. He just waited, patient, unblinking. If you're watching this and your heart is racing right now, hit that like button, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. Victoria's hand found Anaya's, squeezed tight. They were still frozen, still terrified. But something in the air had shifted. This man. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't threatening. But his presence was louder than any scream. I asked you a question, Mr. Cooper said. His voice was quiet, controlled, but it cut like glass. Where is their mother? Anaya swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. Her voice barely worked, but she forced the words out. She's sick. Mr. Cooper's eyes narrowed, not in anger, in focus. Sick, he repeated. And so you're here, working in her place. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a realization, and it landed like a stone. Victoria nodded. Her chin trembled. She bit her lip to keep from crying. How old are you? Mr. Cooper asked. 8, Anaya whispered. The room went completely still. Mr. Cooper turned, slowly, and when he looked at the staff, his expression had changed. There was no politeness left, no patience, just cold, focused anger. Stop the work, he said. The manager blinked. I'm sorry, what? All of it. Stop the work. Now. Mr. Cooper, I don't think you understand. The agency sent them and I don't care what the agency did, Mr. Cooper said. His voice was steel. These are children, not employees, not helpers. Children. He gestured toward the twins. Get them off the floor. Get them seated. Get them water. And someone explain to me, right now, how this happened in my house without anyone thinking it was a problem. Drop a comment below. Have you ever seen someone in power actually use it for good? Let's talk about it. The staff scrambled. Someone brought chairs. Another rushed to get water. The manager stood frozen, face pale, realizing that everything was unraveling. Mr. Cooper knelt down, slowly, until he was eye level with the twins. He didn't touch them, didn't crowd them. He just made himself smaller, less intimidating. What are your names? He asked gently. Anaya hesitated, then answered. Anaya, and this is Victoria. Anaya, Victoria. He repeated their names carefully, like they mattered. You're very brave, both of you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know why. Maybe because no one had called her brave before. Maybe because someone finally saw them as more than labor, more than invisible. Can you tell me your mother's name? Mr. Cooper asked. Mariam, Anaya said. Mariam Morgan. Mr. Cooper nodded. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at them. You're not in trouble, he said. I need you to understand that. You did nothing wrong. But I need to know, who told you to come here? The twins exchanged a glance. Fear flickered between them. No one told us, Anaya admitted. Her voice cracked. We came on our own. Mama doesn't know we're here. That landed harder than anything else. Mr. Cooper's jaw tightened. He didn't speak for a moment, just processed, calculated. Then he stood. Everyone out, he said. His voice was sharp, final. Except you. He pointed at the manager. You stay. The staff filed out quickly, grateful to escape. The twins sat in their chairs, small, scared, unsure if they'd just made everything worse. The manager stayed rooted in place, sweating now, hands shaking. Mr. Cooper turned to him, and when he spoke, his voice was ice. How long has this been happening? I don't lie to me, Mr. Cooper said. Child labor, in my house, under contract with an agency I pay. How long? The manager's mouth opened, closed, opened again. It's not like that, he stammered. The agency, they sometimes send family members when someone calls out sick. It's just how they operate. It's not official policy, but you knew, Mr. Cooper said, and you didn't stop it. The manager said nothing. Mr. Cooper pulled out his phone again, dialed, waited. I need legal on the line, now. He paused. And get me everything we have on elite cleaning services, contracts, communications, everything. He glanced at the twins, then back at the manager. You're done here, he said quietly. Pack your things. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see what happens when power meets conscience. Because this story is just getting started. The manager left, pale, shaking, knowing his career had just imploded, and in the sudden quiet of that massive mansion, Mr. Cooper stood alone with two 8-year-old girls who'd risked everything for their mother. He looked at them, really looked at them, and something inside him cracked, because he'd spent his whole life building wealth, accumulating power, moving through a world that bent to his will. But in this moment, he realized how little he'd actually seen, how much had been happening right under his nose, in his own house, in a system he'd unknowingly funded, and now that he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. Somewhere across the city, phones were ringing, lawyers were mobilizing. Executives were panicking, not because of two little girls, but because a billionaire had finally asked the right question. And once you ask the right question, everything starts to fall apart. The conference room was too quiet. 5 managers sat around a polished table, expensive suits, careful expressions. No one wanted to speak first, because speaking first meant taking responsibility, and responsibility meant risk. Finally, someone broke the silence. "This looks bad." Everyone nodded, relieved that someone else had said it out loud. "Bad is an understatement," another added. "If this gets out, if anyone finds out we had children working in the estate." "We didn't know," someone else cut in. Defensive. "The agency sent them. How are we supposed to—" "It doesn't matter how it happened," the first manager said. "What matters is what it looks like. And right now, it looks like we exploited children." The room went quiet again. "So what do we do?" someone asked. Their voice was small, scared. Another manager leaned forward, fingers steepled, thinking strategically. "We send them home, quietly. We pay the mother, generously. We make sure she signs something, an NDA, and we move on." Heads nodded around the table. It was clean, simple, problem solved. "And Mr. Cooper?" someone asked. Pause. "He'll understand," the manager said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. "He's a businessman. He knows how this works. Protect the brand. Minimize exposure. It's just smart." If you're feeling the tension building, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is about to flip everything. But Mr. Cooper wasn't in that meeting. He was in his office. Door closed. Phone pressed to his ear. Listening. On the other end, a hospital administrator was reading from a file. "Mariam Morgan, admitted 3 days ago. Severe pneumonia with complications. Stage 3 progression. She was discharged yesterday against medical advice because—" The administrator paused. "Because she couldn't afford to stay." Mr. Cooper said nothing. He just listened, jaw tight, eyes hard. "She was prescribed medication and rest," the administrator continued. "But our notes indicate she told the attending physician she had to return to work immediately. No sick leave, no insurance. She was quite clear about her situation." "What's her prognosis?" Mr. Cooper asked. His voice was flat, controlled. "With proper treatment and rest, manageable. Without it—" Another pause, longer this time. 6 months. Maybe less?" Mr. Cooper closed his eyes, breathed slowly, then opened them. "Send me everything," he said. "Medical records, bills, all of it." "Mr. Cooper, I'm not sure we can release. I'll have my legal team contact you within the hour. Send me everything." He hung up. Downstairs, the twins sat in a small sitting room. Someone had brought them food, sandwiches, fruit, water. They stared at it like it was a trap. Victoria picked up a strawberry, held it, put it down. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. Anaya didn't answer. She just watched the door, waiting, afraid. Then the door opened. Mr. Cooper stepped in, alone. He pulled a chair across from them, sat down slowly, looked at them with an expression they couldn't read. "Your mother is very sick," he said gently. "You already know that. But what you might not know is how sick." The twins didn't move. "She needs treatment, real treatment, rest, medicine, time." He paused. "None of which she can afford." Anaya's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back, tried to stay strong. "That's why you came here, isn't it?" Mr. Cooper asked. "To work in her place, so she wouldn't lose her job, so she'd have money for rent, for food, for everything." Victoria nodded. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Mr. Cooper leaned back, exhaled slowly, and for a moment he looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, like he was carrying something heavy. Do you know what I do? He asked. I run companies. I make decisions that affect thousands of people. I move money around. I build things. I solve problems. The twins said nothing. And I thought I was good at it, he continued. I thought I understood how the world worked. But sitting here, looking at you two, I realize I didn't understand anything. Drop a like if you've ever felt invisible, because that's what this story is really about. Upstairs, the managers were finalizing their plan. We offer her $50,000, one said. Enough to look generous, not enough to raise questions. And the NDA? Standard. She doesn't talk. We don't talk. Everyone moves on. What about the girls? They're 8. No one will believe them. And even if they talk, who's going to care about the story of 2 kids from a one-room apartment? It was cold, calculated, efficient, and it would have worked, in most situations, with most people, but not with Mr. Cooper. He stood, looked down at the twins. I'm going to fix this, he said, not with money, not with contracts, but the right way. Anaya looked up at him, confused, hopeful, scared. What does that mean? She asked. It means your mother is going to get the treatment she needs. It means you two are going to go to school. It means you're never scrubbing floors again. He paused. And it means I'm going to make sure no one else ends up in your situation. Not in my house, not in my companies, not anywhere I have power to stop it. Victoria's face crumpled. She started crying. Not sad tears. Relief. Like she'd been holding her breath for months and could finally exhale. Anaya just stared at him, searching his face, looking for the lie, the catch, the moment when this kindness would turn into something else. But it didn't come. Why are you helping us? She asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Cooper crouched down, eye level again. Because someone should have helped you a long time ago, he said. And no one did, including me. Comment below. Do you believe people can change? Because this story is about to test that question. Across the city, Mariam woke up. The apartment was too quiet. She sat up, looked around. Empty. Anaya, she called. Her voice was weak, hoarse. Victoria? No answer. She stood, legs shaking, walked to the bathroom, the kitchen, the tiny corner where they kept their clothes. Nothing. Then she saw it. The note, folded on the mattress. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, unfolded it, read the messy handwriting. Mama, please don't be angry. We are helping. The paper slipped from her fingers. And Mariam Morgan, the woman who'd worked through pain, who'd smiled through blood, who'd carried the weight of the world on her shoulders without ever breaking. She fell to her knees and screamed. Mariam couldn't breathe, not because of her lungs this time, but because her world had just collapsed. The note was still on the floor, those childish letters, that devastating sentence. Mama, please don't be angry. We are helping. Her daughters, her babies, 8 years old, had dressed themselves in her uniform, had taken a bus across the city, had walked into a stranger's mansion, had scrubbed floors. For her. The guilt hit like a freight train, so hard she couldn't stand, so heavy she couldn't think. She'd failed them, failed to protect them, failed to keep them safe, failed to be enough. And now they were somewhere she didn't know, doing work they should never have to do, carrying a weight that wasn't theirs to carry. Mariam grabbed her phone, hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. The cleaning agency, the only number she had. Elite Cleaning Services, how can I... My daughters, Mariam gasped. Her voice was raw, broken. My daughters went to work for me. Where are they? Which house? Please, I need to know. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down and... I can't calm down, Mariam screamed. They're 8 years old. Tell me where they are. Silence, then typing, then a pause that lasted forever. Cooper Estate, the voice said finally. Cold, professional. But ma'am, there's been a situation. Mariam's blood went cold. What situation? I'm not authorized to. Mariam hung up, grabbed her coat, and ran. If you're a parent watching this, you already know what she's feeling. Hit that like button, because this chapter is going to hurt. The estate was 40 minutes away by bus. Mariam made it in 30, running when she could, coughing when she couldn't, ignoring the pain in her chest, ignoring everything except the need to get to her children. The security guard saw her coming, a woman in a faded coat, no shoes that fit right, eyes wild with fear. I need to see my daughters, she said, gasping for air. Anaya and Victoria, they're inside. Please, I need... The guard held up a hand. Ma'am, Mr. Cooper is expecting you. Go ahead. Expecting her. Mariam didn't have time to process that. She just ran. Up the driveway, past the fountains, past the cars, past everything that screamed wealth and power and not for you. The front door opened before she reached it, and there they were. Anaya, Victoria. Sitting in a room that looked like it cost more than Mariam would ever make in her lifetime. Safe, clean, unhurt. Mariam collapsed. Not physically, but emotionally. She dropped to her knees in the doorway, and the sob that came out of her was something primal. Relief, grief, shame, all at once. Mama! Victoria jumped up, ran to her, threw her arms around her mother's neck. Anaya followed, slower, quieter, but her face said everything. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Mr. Cooper stood at the edge of the room, watching, not interfering, just observing. When Mariam finally looked up, her face was soaked with tears, and the first words out of her mouth were the ones she'd been trained to say her entire life. I'm so sorry. Mr. Cooper frowned. Sorry for what? For this. For my daughters being here. For bothering you. For... Stop, Mr. Cooper said gently, but firmly. You have nothing to apologize for. Mariam stared at him, confused, because in her world, people like her always apologized. To people like him, that's how it worked. Your daughters came here because they love you, Mr. Cooper continued. Because you're sick, because the system failed you. None of that is your fault. Mariam shook her head. She didn't believe him, couldn't believe him, because if it wasn't her fault, then who was responsible? And if no one was responsible, then what did that say about the world? Subscribe if you believe people deserve dignity, not charity. Dignity. There's a difference. A woman entered the room. Designer clothes, polished smile, a tablet in her hands. Ms. Morgan, she said warmly, my name is Patricia. I work in public relations for Mr. Cooper's foundation. Mariam stood slowly, wary. We'd like to help you, Patricia continued. Medical expenses, housing, everything you need, and in exchange we'd love to share your story. A short video, maybe a press release, nothing invasive, just showing how we support families in need. The words sounded kind, but something in Mariam's chest tightened. Cameras? She asked quietly. Patricia smiled. Just a few photos, maybe a short interview. People love stories like yours. It inspires them, and it shows the impact of our work. Mariam looked at her daughters, then back at Patricia. No, she said. The smile faltered. I'm sorry. No cameras, Mariam repeated. Her voice was stronger now. No interviews, no press releases. Patricia glanced at Mr. Cooper. Uncomfortable. Ms. Morgan, I understand your hesitation, but this is a wonderful opportunity to... To what? Mariam cut in. To show the world how generous you are? To put my daughters on display so people can feel good about donating? Patricia's face went pale. That's not... I know what this is, Mariam said. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. You want to help, but you also want credit. You want the story, the optics, the proof that you're good people. She took a breath, fought through the coughing fit that wanted to take over. I'm not your charity case, she said, and my daughters aren't your before and after photo. Comment below. Is she right to refuse, or is she letting pride get in the way? Let's debate. The room went silent. Patricia looked to Mr. Cooper, waiting for him to step in, to smooth things over, to make this easier. But Mr. Cooper didn't move. He just looked at Mariam, really looked at her, and for the first time since this whole thing started, he saw her, not as a victim, not as a story, but as a woman with dignity, with boundaries, with the right to say no. You're right, he said quietly. Patricia blinked. Excuse me? She's right, Mr. Cooper repeated. He turned to Patricia. No cameras, no press, no conditions. But, sir, this is a perfect opportunity to... I don't care about the opportunity, Mr. Cooper said. His voice was calm, but absolute. I care about doing the right thing, and the right thing doesn't require an audience. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded stiffly and left the room. Mariam stared at Mr. Cooper, shocked, because people like him didn't do things without getting something in return. That wasn't how the world worked. Why? She asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Because you deserve help, Mr. Cooper said. Not performance, not publicity, just help. He paused, then added, but I need you to let me help. No cameras, no strings, just medical care, a safe place to live, time to heal. Mariam's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't from shame. I don't know how to accept that, she admitted. Then let your daughters teach you, Mr. Cooper said. He glanced at the twins. They came here because they believed someone would help. Maybe it's time you believed it too. Mariam looked at Anaya, at Victoria, at their faces full of hope, and slowly. She nodded. But in the back of the room, through the partially open door, two executives watched, faces tight, unhappy, because Mr. Cooper had just made a choice, conscience over optics, and in their world. That was dangerous. Mr. Cooper didn't make speeches. He didn't call press conferences, didn't send out memos, didn't gather his team for some inspiring moment about values and change. He just acted, because talk is cheap, and action. Action is what separates people who mean well from people who do well. The first call went out at 7 a.m. the next morning. This is Mr. Cooper. I need Dr. Reyes from Mercy General on the line, now. 10 minutes later, he was speaking with the head of the hospital's pulmonary department. Mariam Morgan, Mr. Cooper said. She was a patient of yours, discharged early because she couldn't afford treatment. Yes, I remember her case, Dr. Reyes said carefully. Stage 3 pneumonia. She needed... I know what she needed, Mr. Cooper cut in, and I'm calling to make sure she gets it, all of it. Best care available. No cost to her, and I want it to start today. Pause. Mr. Cooper, with all due respect, hospital billing doesn't work that. Make it work, Mr. Cooper said. Not angry, just final. Send the bills to my office, all of them, past, present, future, and make sure she knows that her only job right now is to get better, not to worry, not to calculate costs, just to heal. Another pause. Longer this time. Consider it done, Dr. Reyes said. Mr. Cooper hung up, made the next call. If you're watching this and thinking, why doesn't this happen more often? hit that subscribe button, because we need more stories like this, and your support makes them possible. By noon, Mariam had a team, a case manager, a respiratory therapist, a nutritionist, a social worker, people whose entire job was to make sure she survived. She sat in the hospital room, staring at the IV in her arm, at the machines monitoring her breathing, at the doctor explaining her treatment plan with words like recovery and stabilization instead of palliative and managed decline. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Who's paying for this?" The doctor smiled. "It's been taken care of." "By who?" "Someone who wants you to focus on getting better." Mariam's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to refuse, wanted to say she couldn't accept this, but her body was too tired, too broken, too desperate to live. So instead, she just whispered, "Thank you." At the same time, across town, another call was being made. "Elite Cleaning Services. How can I—" "This is Mr. Cooper. I'm calling about Mariam Morgan." The voice on the other end went stiff, professional, nervous. "Yes, Mr. Cooper. We've been meaning to reach out about the incident. We want to assure you that—" "I'm not interested in assurances," Mr. Cooper said. "I'm interested in facts. How many other employees have you sent family members to cover for when they called in sick?" Silence. "I asked you a question." It's not official policy, but sometimes—" "How many?" Mr. Cooper's voice was steel. I'd have to check our records." "Then check them. And while you're at it, draft a new policy. No family substitutions, no underage workers, no exceptions. And every employee gets 3 paid sick days per month. Non-negotiable." "Mr. Cooper, that's not economically—" "I don't care about your economics," he said. "I care about your ethics. You have 48 hours to implement these changes. If you can't, I'll find a cleaning service that can. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good. And one more thing. Mariam Morgan has 6 months of paid leave, starting today. Her job will be waiting for her when she's ready to return. If it's not, I'll know." He hung up. Drop a like if you believe in holding people accountable, because that's what real change looks like. But Mr. Cooper wasn't done. That afternoon, he called his head of operations. "I want an audit," he said. "Every contractor we use, every service provider, every vendor. I want to know how they treat their employees, wages, benefits, working conditions, all of it." "Sir, that's going to take months." "Then start today. And if we find issues, we fix them, or we fire them. Simple as that." He leaned back in his chair, thought for a moment, then added, "And I want a new position created, Director of Ethical Compliance. Someone whose entire job is to make sure we're not profiting off suffering. Someone who reports directly to me." "Understood." "One more thing," Mr. Cooper said. "Anaya and Victoria Morgan. I want them enrolled in Westbridge Academy, full scholarships, transportation included, starting next semester." His operations head hesitated. "Sir, Westbridge has a waiting list of—" "I'm aware," Mr. Cooper said. "I'm also on the board. Make it happen." By the end of the week, the changes were in motion. Policies rewritten, contracts renegotiated, phone calls made, meetings held, resistance encountered, and crushed. Because once the machine started moving, it was hard to stop. Managers who'd fought the changes suddenly found themselves reassigned. Vendors who refused to comply lost their contracts. Systems that had operated in shadows were dragged into light, and the people who'd built their careers on those systems, they watched, and they learned. That Mr. Cooper wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't a phase, that something had fundamentally shifted. Comment below. Have you ever seen one person's decision create a ripple effect? Because that's what's happening here. 3 weeks later, Mariam stood in the doorway of a new apartment. Not a one-room box. A real apartment. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a stove that worked, windows that let in light, a bathroom with hot water. She turned to the case manager beside her. "This is too much." "It's temporary housing," the woman said, "until you're back on your feet. No rent. Just focus on recovery." Mariam shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do," the case manager said firmly. "You've worked your entire life. You've sacrificed everything for your daughters. You deserve rest. You deserve care. You deserve help." Mariam's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but she was too tired. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe it. That night, Anaya and Victoria explored their new home. They had beds, real beds, with mattresses that didn't sag, with blankets that didn't have holes. They had a room, their own room, with a door that closed, with space to breathe. Victoria spun in a circle, laughing, free. Anaya stood at the window, looking out at the city, at the lights, at the world that suddenly felt a little less cruel. "Do you think it's real?" Victoria asked. Her voice was quiet, careful, like she was afraid to hope. Anaya didn't answer right away. She just watched the lights, and then finally, she nodded. "Yeah," she said, "I think it is." But in the back of her mind, Anaya knew something important, that none of this would have happened if they'd stayed silent, if they'd accepted their place, if they'd believed the world couldn't change. They'd scrubbed floors because they had to, but someone had seen them, and that person had decided to act. And now, everything was different. Not perfect, not fixed, but different. And sometimes, different is enough to start. The coughing stopped first. Not all at once, but gradually, day by day, week by week, until Mariam woke up one morning and realized she'd slept through the entire night without gasping for air. She sat up slowly, testing, waiting for the familiar burn in her chest, the tightness, the fear, but it didn't come. She could breathe. For the first time in months, she could breathe. And she cried, not from pain, but from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that she wasn't dying anymore. She was living. The apartment became a home. Slowly, carefully, like they were learning how to exist in a space that didn't demand survival every single second. Mariam cooked breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, toast, fruit. Not because it was all they could afford, but because it was what they wanted. Anaya and Victoria sat at the small table, eating slowly, savoring, still not entirely convinced that the food wouldn't disappear. "Mama," Victoria said quietly, "are we allowed to be happy?" Mariam looked up. Her heart broke a little, because her daughter shouldn't have to ask permission to feel joy. "Yes, baby," she said. Her voice was soft, steady. "We're allowed." Victoria nodded, but her face was still uncertain, like happiness was something dangerous, something that could be taken away at any moment. Mariam reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. "We're safe now," she said. "I promise. If you've ever had to relearn how to feel safe, hit that subscribe button, because this part of the story matters just as much as the rescue." The first day of school was harder than expected, not because Westbridge Academy wasn't beautiful. It was. Massive buildings, perfect lawns, kids in uniforms that cost more than Mariam used to make in a month. But Anaya and Victoria stood at the entrance, frozen, small, out of place. "I don't know if I can do this," Anaya whispered. Mariam knelt down, eye level, just like Mr. Cooper had done weeks ago. "You've already done harder things," she said. "You survived. You protected me. You were brave when the world told you to be invisible. She paused. This is just school, and you belong here, just as much as anyone else. Anaya's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Victoria grabbed her sister's hand, squeezed tight, and together, they walked through the doors. Inside, the world was different. Clean, organized, quiet in a way that felt peaceful instead of oppressive. Teachers smiled. Other kids said hello. The cafeteria had food that didn't come in plastic containers. The library had books with pages that weren't torn. It was overwhelming. But it was also good. Anaya sat in her first class. Math. The teacher was explaining fractions, and for the first time in her life, Anaya wasn't thinking about rent, or food, or whether her mother would survive the week. She was just a kid learning math. It felt strange, foreign, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit yet, but she was starting to adjust. Drop a like if you believe every child deserves this, not as charity, but as a right. Mr. Cooper kept his distance. He didn't visit, didn't check in, didn't send flowers or cards or messages asking how they were doing. Because this wasn't about him. He'd made the calls, signed the checks, set things in motion, but he understood something important. That real help doesn't require gratitude, or updates, or ownership. Real help creates space for people to heal, and then it steps back. So he did. He went back to his life, his companies, his responsibilities. But he carried something with him now, a weight, an awareness, that the world was full of Mariams. And Anaya's, and Victoria's, people working themselves to death, kids growing up too fast, families one emergency away from collapse, and most of them would never knock on his door, never scrub his floors, never force him to see them. But now that he'd seen, he couldn't unsee. Mariam got a letter one day, not from Mr. Cooper, from the hospital, a final statement, every bill, every charge, every procedure, and at the bottom, in bold letters, paid in full. She stared at it for a long time, trying to process, trying to understand what it meant to owe nothing, to be free of debt, to not have every breath calculated against cost. There was no note, no message, no request for thanks, just the statement, and the freedom it represented. Mariam folded the paper carefully, put it in a drawer, and allowed herself to cry one more time. Not from sadness, but from release. 3 months later, Mariam returned to work, not because she had to, but because she was ready. She showed up at the cleaning agency's office. New uniform, steady breath, clear lungs. The manager looked up, surprised, uncomfortable. "Ms. Morgan," he said, We didn't expect you back so soon. Your leave was—" "I'm ready," Mariam said simply. The manager nodded. "Of course, we've made some changes. New policies, better conditions. You'll find things are different now." Mariam smiled. "Good." She didn't tell him that she knew who'd forced those changes, that she knew Mr. Cooper had held them accountable, that the world had shifted because someone had finally cared enough to act. She just picked up her supplies, clocked in, and went to work. But this time, it felt different. Not because the work had changed, but because she had. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Comment below. What does healing look like to you? Because it's different for everyone. That night, the three of them sat together in their apartment. Mariam was reading. Anaya was doing homework. Victoria was drawing. Normal, quiet, simple. And in that simplicity, there was something profound. They weren't a tragedy anymore. They weren't a story. They weren't a before and after photo. They were just a family, healing, growing, moving forward. But as Mariam watched her daughters, a question stirred in her mind. What came next? They'd survived. They'd been saved. They'd been given a second chance. But what kind of future did they build with it? What did life look like after the crisis ended? After the intervention faded? After the spotlight moved on, did they just exist? Grateful but small? Or did they become something more? Mariam didn't have the answer yet, but she knew one thing. Her daughters had been brave enough to walk into a billionaire's mansion, to demand help when the world told them they didn't matter. And that bravery, that refusal to accept invisibility, that was just the beginning. Because survival isn't the end of the story. It's the start of something bigger. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. You want to know what really shocked everyone? It wasn't the rescue. It wasn't the medical bills. It wasn't the scholarships or the apartment or the paid leave. Those things were remarkable, but they weren't shocking. What shocked everyone was what didn't happen next. No press conference. No viral video. No foundation announcement with carefully staged photos of grateful faces. No interview where Mr. Cooper talked about giving back or making a difference, while cameras captured every perfectly rehearsed word. None of that. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable. Because in a world where every good deed gets posted, shared, and monetized, doing something quietly feels almost suspicious. But Mr. Cooper didn't care about the optics. He'd made his choice. And then he'd moved on. If you're watching this and thinking, wait, that's it? Hit that subscribe button. Because yes, that's it. And that's exactly the point. 6 months passed. The reforms Mr. Cooper had demanded. They stuck. Elite cleaning services had new policies. Real ones. Paid sick leave. No family substitutions. Regular audits. Accountability. Other companies in the area started adopting similar standards. Not because they wanted to, but because word got around. And suddenly, exploitation wasn't just unethical. It was bad for business. One billionaire asked one question, and the ripple effect spread further than anyone expected. But you wouldn't know that from reading about Mr. Cooper, because he never talked about it, never used it to boost his image, never turned it into a TED Talk or a best-selling book about conscious capitalism. He just did the work and kept moving. Mariam was back at work now, fully healed, lungs clear, breath steady. But her life was different. She worked reasonable hours, took breaks, had benefits, could call in sick without fear of losing everything. The job hadn't changed, but the conditions had, and that made all the difference. One day, she was cleaning an office building downtown, wiping down windows, humming to herself, and she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of tomorrow, not of bills, not of her body giving out before her daughters grew up. She was just working, living, existing without the constant weight of survival crushing her chest. And that feeling, that freedom, was worth more than any charity could ever give. Drop a like if you understand the difference between a handout and actual change, because that's what this whole story is about. Anaya and Victoria were thriving. Not perfectly, not without struggles, but thriving. Anaya was at the top of her class, quiet, focused, still carrying the weight of what they'd been through, but learning to set it down piece by piece. Victoria was louder now, laughing more, making friends, believing in good things again. They still had nightmares sometimes, still woke up thinking they were back in the one-room apartment, still flinched when they saw cleaning supplies. But those moments were getting rarer, and the good moments, they were multiplying. One afternoon, Victoria ran home from school, burst through the door, face flushed with excitement. "Mama, Mama, I got picked for the school play." Mariam looked up from the stove, smiled. "That's wonderful, baby. Can you come? It's in 3 weeks, on a Wednesday." Mariam didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, didn't weigh the cost of missing work. She just said, "I'll be there." And she meant it, because she could afford to now, not just financially, but emotionally. She could afford to be a mother, not just a survivor. Comment below. What does real healing look like to you? Because this is it. Mr. Cooper never visited. He never checked in, never asked for updates, never required proof that his help had worked. He'd set things in motion, and then he'd let go. Because he understood something that most people with power don't. That true generosity doesn't demand gratitude. It doesn't require performance. It doesn't need witnesses. It just is. And then it steps aside. He went back to running his companies, making deals, building things. But something had shifted in him. He paid attention now to the people who cleaned his offices, who drove his cars, who served his food, who made his world function. He saw them, not as labor, not as services, but as people. And when he saw problems, he fixed them. Quietly, without fanfare, without expectation. Because that's what power should do, not perform goodness, but practice it. The mansion was quiet now. The marble floors still gleamed. The rooms still stretched endlessly. The chandeliers still hung like frozen stars. But the memory lingered. Of two small girls on their knees. Of a question that stopped everything. Of a choice that changed lives. The staff who'd been there that day never forgot it. Some of them left. Uncomfortable with the changes. With the accountability. With the loss of control. But others stayed, and they were different now, more careful, more aware, more human. Because once you see suffering, really see it, you can't unsee it. And once you know you have the power to stop it, doing nothing becomes impossible. Years from now, Anaya and Victoria would look back on this moment. They'd remember the fear, the exhaustion, the desperation that drove them to scrub floors at 8 years old. But they'd also remember something else, that someone saw them, someone stopped, someone asked why. And that question, that simple, devastating question, changed everything. Not just for them, but for everyone who came after. Because systems don't change because of generosity. They change because of responsibility. And the most shocking thing a billionaire can do isn't to write a check. It's to care. And then step aside. To use power not to own, but to liberate. To help not for credit, but because it's right. That's the real story. Not the rescue, but the restraint. Not the intervention, but the aftermath. Not the spotlight, but the silence. Somewhere in the city, in a small apartment with 2 bedrooms and windows that let in light, a mother and her daughters sat together, laughing, talking, planning tomorrows they never thought they'd have. And in that moment, they weren't a tragedy. They weren't a headline. They weren't a story about suffering and salvation. They were just a family, healing, growing, living. And that was the most shocking thing of all. If this story moved you, do 3 things. 1, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this need to be told. And your support makes that possible. 2, drop a like. Let the algorithm know that content with meaning matters. 3, comment below. Tell me, what would you do if you had the power to change someone's life? Would you do it quietly? Or would you need the world to know? Because that question, that's the one we all need to answer. Not just billionaires. All of us. Every single day. We have the power to see people, to ask questions, to care, to act. The only question is, will we? Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is notice, and then do something about it. See you in the next story.